Hi there, I am Jen David Lang to welcome you to the Main Idea podcast. I read lots of education and leadership books, and I share the ones I think educational leaders should be reading with you. Thanks so much for taking the time to listen. Today, I am truly excited to talk to Tony Frontier about his latest book, AI with Intention: Principles and Action Steps for Teachers and School Leaders. This is a book that John Hattie has praised as, quote, the best book I have read to introduce all to optimize the power of AI. Wow, that's quite an endorsement from a big person. Tony Frontier is a former middle school teacher, high school administrator, K-12 curriculum director, and professor of leadership studies. He really is a Renaissance man with so many different areas of expertise in the field of education, all aimed at improving learning. He's an educator who works with teachers and school leaders all over the world in areas such as student engagement, evidence-based assessment, effective instruction, technology integration, data analysis, and strategic planning. Wow, that's a lot of areas of expertise. Welcome to the podcast, Tony Frontier.
Thank you, Jen. I appreciate it. Thank you.
So glad to have you here. I have to admit something. When I cracked open your book, I thought I would read exciting ways to use AI for efficiency and to spice up teaching and learning, and that I would share that with leaders all over the world. But I slowed down and I read carefully, and I honestly found this to be one of the most thoughtful and really important books about AI that I have read, and I read a lot. And one that I think all leaders should read, not just to maximize AI, but to ensure you avoid serious damage and consequences to your school from not thinking thoughtfully and intentionally, title of the book, about this incredibly powerful new technology. So let's get started. This book has
Yeah.
two parts, and maybe I'll bring Tony back if he has a moment, but he's very busy to talk about the second part. But today we're going to talk about part one, which is aimed at educational leaders like all of you. So at the very beginning of the book, you say we are at the infancy of a new era with AI, and there are always more questions than answers, but the questions we ask reveal what we value. And I know a lot of people are asking questions about how to use AI to help with efficiency, but I appreciated this book because it addresses a question that is deeply weighing on my mind and the minds of a lot of leaders I work with, which is how can schools be sure to use AI ethically, thoughtfully, and yes, more effectively? I'm sure many of you have read the seminal book by the professor Ethan Mollick, Co-Intelligence, Living and Working with AI, right? And one of his four main principles is always bring AI to the table. And I'm not so sure I agree. And Tony, in fact, you write, quote, just because a tool can be used to accomplish a task more efficiently does not mean it is more effective. So can you explain this and sort of share how this is the foundational idea behind your book?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. The yeah, one of the guiding principles I talk about for leaders is the notion of, fidelity before efficiency, before automaticity. And I know fidelity gets a bad word in some circles in education. And when I say fidelity, I don't mean everyone is on page 263 of the teacher's guide on, November 11th. Not at all. What I mean by fidelity is simply how well have we aligned our stated priorities for teaching and learning with students' opportunity to learn. So when we reach for a tool, um, there's no doubt that people are going to use that tool as we've used tools throughout human history to accomplish work of value more efficiently. So when we reach for AI tools or any tool that's designed to support teaching and learning, right, we have to step back and ask, well, what are our values, right? What are our priorities? So that notion then of, fidelity before efficiency, efficiency before automaticity. If I'm just sitting down to an AI tool and asking it to do core tasks related to teaching and learning, planning lessons, planning assignments or assessments, whatever it may be. If I'm not clear about my purpose, right? What's my purpose? What are my priorities? What I'm going to get back is going to be no better than a random hit from Teachers Pay Teachers.
But it's
Right.
going to be
So
awfully quick, right? We're going to be
it'll be
satisfied.
quick.
It's going
It'll
to
be
create that
quick.
lesson. Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be quick. And it might even look great on the surface, and it might even tell me how brilliant I was for asking, the AI tool to do that. But what matters is, right, how am I prompting this tool or using this tool in ways that are going to align my strategy and efforts to teach and my students' strategy and efforts to learn. So yes, we get that rubric back, we get that assessment back, whatever it may be. But if it's not aligned to my students' learning needs, what have I done? I mean, I've just wasted time, right? So we have to be attuned to what's our purpose for reaching for these tools, because that is going to define and ultimately determine how effective our use is.
But
And
you
then
go
that
even further than to
go
saying
ahead.
it's going to waste your time, right? You say I think in the
Absolutely.
introduction, you write AI tools have nearly unlimited capacity to support effective teaching and learning. And then right below that, you
Yep.
say AI tools have nearly unlimited capacity to undermine effective teaching and learning. So it's more than wasting your time. It's actually undermining
Absolutely.
learning.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that is a trap that we've gotten caught in the last 30, 40 years, as information has become so readily accessible right through the internet. If more was the answer, we would have closed every gap, we would have solved every learning issue, right? We'd be done. um, but it's gotten more challenging. It more has created more challenges. There's more clutter, there's more distraction that is out there than ever before.
Yeah.
And I say that not as, so we can blame the tech companies or blame the kids, or not at all. There's been a really significant shift in how humans access and use information.
Mhm.
And I don't know if we've had, I know we haven't, had the discipline as a field,
Yeah.
right, to just slow down and be more intentional about what resources and opportunities do we need to be sure teachers have access to and that they can provide to kids.
And that's why I appreciate your book, because it isn't, here's a whole bunch of strategies. Here's how you write a prompt. It really is going back to, how do we know when and if to use this new
Yeah,
tool? So,
yeah.
so yeah, I
And
want, yeah, go ahead.
it gets into some of those specifics, absolutely,
Yes.
around some
Yeah.
guiding core principles around prioritizing and effective prompts. But as I tell audiences that I'm working with, today's not going to be, here's 50 fun tips and tricks
Yeah.
that you can use to have AI do everything for you.
Yeah.
We
And
have
I
to ask.
appreciate that we like those tricks as educators.
Absolutely,
We're
absolutely.
exhausted, we work hard, we want that silver bullet, but it is
Absolutely.
time to slow down because of this potential for damaging learning and damaging a lot more. So yeah. So should we get into your four
Sure.
principles? Yeah. So
Great.
we're just going to focus on four principles, not PALS today. The first one is that you should lead by learning. That is, be a learning leader, as Peter Senge says, right? Not a reactive leader, a learning leader. And you start this principle with a quote by a computer scientist. Quote, we're at the beginning of a new technological era, and the easiest way to mismanage a technology is to misunderstand it. The easiest way to mismanage a technology is to misunderstand it. So, can you talk about some concerns you have about what leaders might misunderstand about AI, and what are some of just a few of the facts or attributes of this new technology they should know?
Yeah. Yeah. So leaders don't need to become, programming experts or anything, but we need enough understanding of the general form and function of tools to be able to engage in conversations and guide others. So there are some misconceptions that I talk about around AI. AI is not a monolith. There are a variety of different tools that are trained in different ways and can be applied in different ways. And we need enough understanding of what's the capacity of some of the most widely used generative models in particular. So like a ChatGPT, a Gemini, Claude, and we should be reading up on AI in general and listening to podcasts and conversations like these. But we should be engaging with these tools. We should be using these tools and not just in thinking in terms of what's my workflow, but to stand in the shoes of a teacher, right? And if you're an administrator who used to teach, put that old teaching hat on. Well, what are some things that I might have asked that tool to do? And then what's working, what isn't, what seems well aligned, what seems effective, but also standing in the shoes of students, right? What can AI tools do well? What can't they do well? A lot of people talk about when AI tools make errors, and they absolutely do. But in general, I've found, right, the more we understand how is this model designed to be used? How can I prompt it in really specific, very concrete ways? I've just been continuously surprised at what they're capable of. So we need to have enough understanding broadly of what these tools can do so that as we engage in conversations, we can be informed enough to ask big questions, which is something I'll talk about in a bit. But yes, we need our tech folks there to talk about, privacy requirements and network capabilities. Absolutely, we have to tend to those components. But I think the most important thing to keep in mind when interacting with AI tools, the limiting factor is ultimately your language of expertise, right? In the very near future, if not already, AI tools are going to be able to accomplish and plan any academic task that can be done digitally, right? So really the language of quote unquote programming and interacting with AI is your language of expertise. So we need to empower teachers, and we need to ensure that those voices are present when we're having conversations, making decisions about how can these tools be put to use in ways that are both effective, and efficient.
So continue to learn, listen to podcasts, read books like yours. And then you also described, some patterns and things coming down the pike or things that are already here, certain concerns about student mental health, the fact that there are
Yeah.
ages, but there are underage students and will continue to be underage students who outwit and use AI. There are legal and ethical issues. So you write about some of those issues as well. The problem with anthropomorphizing AI, right? You said earlier that AI is going to compliment you on the lesson that you asked
Yeah.
it to help you write. Any of those float to the surface as you think about school leaders and concerns they need to be particularly worried about?
Yeah, one in particular. Last May I did more than 20 hours of focus groups in 7 different high schools, uh, talking to them about how they are using AI tools, the instruction they're receiving, and the piece that came through loud and clear is that the kids are ahead of us,
Mm-hmm.
right? We There's a lot of work that schools are still doing to clarify, okay, what is our kind of official policy, and what is appropriate and inappropriate use, and who can and who can't. And a lot of schools, rightfully, due to some safety concerns, but maybe have blocked AI tools on their network. There are solutions out there that you can give kids access to AI tools at school in ways that are um, appropriate and meet certain requirements for middle school and high school students. But high school kids are using AI tools, and they are practically begging for how to use them effectively. And we'll maybe can link to the article in the
Yeah,
in
yeah, and more than
the
high school,
show.
certainly middle school too, yeah.
But yeah, but just really, this has to be, have your personal professional opinion, okay? But then we've got to say, but how are kids using these tools? When I was an associate principal in a high school 25 years ago, we kind of had a general understanding at the time that social media was a thing that was out there, but we had blocked it on our school's networks. And if social media stuff spilled into school, it would be dealt with as any other discipline issue that spilled into school. We got that completely wrong, right? Yes, kids couldn't access it in school,
Yeah.
but it sure had a profound impact on, right, kids' socialization, kids' conceptualization of relationships and friendships and how they
Downright
acquire
mental health.
information.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've got to take the lead. We have
Yeah.
to insert ourselves
Yes, we
in,
can't
in
wait for it to
with
come
the
into
lead.
the school. It's there. Yes. Yeah, and we'll get
Exactly.
to some of that in a moment. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, there are a lot of big concerns and leaders need to sort of have that balance of both jumping in, using it, ask everyone how they're using it, but also be very aware of these huge concerns that are here now, as we saw with cell phones and social media and the problems
Yeah.
that came from that. So yeah, so this first principle is about taking a learning approach as a leader.
Yep.
And after a while, you're learning, you're also leading this enormous change, right? It's a
Yep.
huge change that is here, it continues to come. So, your second principle is about how to approach that change. And you suggest taking a transformational approach rather than a transactional approach. I've usually described that as like an adaptive approach to
Yep.
change.
Yep.
So, for people who aren't familiar, can you explain these two approaches to change and why leaders should take more of a transformational or deeper approach to change than a transactional one?
Yep. Yeah. And the notion of transactional change, and yeah, we could talk about type one or type two or technical or adaptive, but transactional change, the premise there is people have the knowledge and skills required to accomplish a task or achieve a goal, but there's been some shift maybe in the external equation, and individuals need new incentives or rewards or consequences. Um, but it's kind of saying, hey, you know how the system works. We're going to use this tool instead, or I need you to do this thing more often. That is transactional change. Um, but if I'm engaged in transformational change, the premise of the work, the premise of the system, the premise of the tools and resources is different. So we need to think about how we are going to utilize those tools or resources in very different ways. It's not just do more of it or do less of it. So Heifetz and Linsky in their work on change, they talk about how, the greatest leadership failure is that people treat, how I talk about is, transformational challenges, I'm paraphrasing here, as transactional problems. And the idea is, well, if we just do this one thing, that'll fix it, and then it's all better. If we just block it on the network, then challenges with AI will go away. If we just run a couple workshops, then teachers will know how to use AI. If we just beef up our academic integrity policy, then kids won't use AI tools to cheat anymore.
Can we use that as
But
an example? So yeah, I think,
yeah,
for anyone who thinks of this as a little bit abstract, the idea, and I think of it as changing hearts and minds
sure.
rather than just changing, behaviors. So
Yep,
you
that
give an
works.
example in the book, which I think is very helpful if this is feel sounding abstract. And you talk about, I don't know if it's a real school, that has an academic dishonesty policy, right? So now we're just gonna add in a little bit about AI, right? So that our academic dishonesty policy covers AI. And everybody knows that it's not so easy to do that, right? So instead, that was a transactional approach. But a transformational approach is to scrap the academic dishonesty or the cheating policy. Instead, they come up with our shared commitment for academic integrity.
Mm-hmm.
Can you share? So, how is that different than just having a policy against cheating in AI?
Yep, yep. Yeah, and we still, right, we need policies on cheating. We need those boundaries,
Yeah.
absolutely. But a lot of times what we do is we have flowery language around what integrity is, and then we just say, and here's what cheating is, don't do it. Well, telling someone what not to do, right, is not the same thing as teaching them what to do. So you take a transactional approach to AI kind of out to the nth degree, and this is happening, and I'm seeing this happen You end up with something like a teacher uses AI to create assignments. Kids use AI to complete the assignments.
Mhm.
Teachers use AI to grade the assignments. And then we move on to the next thing, right?
Yeah.
And if you look at the grade book, right, there are all these transactions happening,
Yeah.
but there's no learning
And it's a
that
pretty funny example too, if you think about it, right?
it's happening.
Yeah.
It is happening.
Yeah.
So if we think about a more transformational approach, we might step back far enough to say, there have been issues with cheating or integrity for a long time,
Yeah.
and maybe some of our panic and concern that, hey, kids are using AI to do their schoolwork. Well, maybe there's some questions we should have been asking all along, because some kids go home and have parents who help them do their schoolwork.
Yeah.
Some kids have tutors who help them do their
Yeah.
schoolwork.
Yeah.
So is the issue, um, at its core related to, hey, are students really doing their work? That's the cheating question.
Yeah.
Or is it, do students, how well do they really understand the work that they're turning in?
Yeah.
That's an integrity question,
Yeah.
right? And that is a question that is really defined by the partnership between a teacher and learner.
Yeah.
It's about classroom culture, right? Do I just emphasize and talk about grades and points
Yeah.
and consequences?
Yeah.
Or do I talk about, here's what we're learning, here's why?
Hmm.
I might emphasize in that more academic integrity focused approach, um, transparency, right? Just to let kids know, hey, I always need to know what resources you are using to do your work, what sources you're using, what support you are receiving.
Hmm.
Because if I think there's work you're doing independently that actually you're doing only through a lot of additional support, then I can't teach you, right? I can't teach you because I don't understand where you are. The assessment evidence that's coming back to me doesn't have integrity.
Right.
Another important component related to integrity is the notion of explainability.
Yes.
And I talk about just the notion there of anytime you turn in work,
Hmm.
I can have follow-up questions. Can you explain what are the most important ideas in what you wrote? Can you explain, how your work or whatever the task was might have been different if I change some piece of the scenario? It's just good formative assessment. It's just good incorporating prompts and into assessment design, that really get at not just what did the kid do, but what do they really understand. So maybe it is after that assessment gets turned in or uploaded to the content management system, it's asking that question. So what are your three most important takeaways about this topic we just learned about, or summarize your essay in a short, concise paragraph. Now, when I get that information back, it may or may not be evidence that the child has cheated.
Yep.
But if there's a big gap between what they turned in and what they can explain, that's problematic. And I need to know, and we need to talk about that and go deeper. So when I talk about a transformational versus a transactional approach, as you said, changing hearts and minds versus just behaviors, a lot of this is a lot of the challenges we're bumping up against. I really encourage leaders to see those as a mirror.
Mm.
That is feedback to us about what the system seems to value, or maybe what kids think the system values,
Mm.
or our teachers perhaps being overworked and overwhelmed, and what they value. Um, so it's really important that we don't just try to solve this problem too quickly,
Yeah.
because inevitably what we'll end up doing is making a decision that simply preserves the status quo while the rest of the world moves on.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll come up with some transactional new policies, consequences, but they kind of end up being a set of parameters that were useful in the past
Hmm.
that are no longer. And
Yeah.
one of the most important things that leaders can do in a time of transformational change is just it's ask really big questions. We need to challenge assumptions. We should be convening committees that are looking at what now and what next, and big questions that don't necessarily have easy answers.
Sure.
So sometimes the foundational questions we need to be asking about AI, they don't even have AI in the question.
Yeah.
It's big
Can we
questions
can we
like,
get to the questions in a moment?
yeah,
Because
yeah, sure, go
yeah,
ahead, go
yeah,
ahead.
it's hard. The principles are all related, but you sort of wove in.
Hmm.
You got into the third principle, which is about emphasizing integrity.
Yep, yep.
And I like you just said so much
That's
that I would no no I want to I want to unpack it and also emphasize some of what you're saying and what really struck me about your book. So, in your chapter in talking about the third principle, emphasizing integrity, you shared some very shocking statistics about cheating.
right.
Um, that 95% of students admitted to cheating in some way, 95% in 2020. So that's before
Hmm.
AI. So,
Right.
all those examples you gave of other ways, you have an expensive tutor, or, you paid somebody in Kenya to write your essay for you, right? There are all these other ways that cheating was happening before. Or another study found in a certain month, 65% of students were found cheating, and it was the same before and after ChatGPT was introduced. So,
Yeah.
so by going, the second principle of transformational change to me is about getting to the root.
Yes.
Why are kids in a position where they're cheating? If it's not AI, it's some other way. So if you don't get to the root of the problem, it's not going to be real change. It's going to be real lasting change. It's going to be surface change.
Yeah.
So this focus on integrity is about, addressing this underlying issue of why kids are cheating. And people may think, well, this is a podcast about AI. Why are you getting so into, people in Kenya writing essays for our students? Because that's it's just a tool. AI is just a tool, and it's
Mhm.
how our students and our teachers are using it. And
Mhm.
so I really like your ideas about getting to the root of it. And in the book, you talk about the responsibilities, and this is where a leader can come in and outlining what are the responsibilities of administrators, teachers, students, families
Mhm.
be committed to academic integrity, right? As
Yeah.
leaders, maybe one of our actions is we need to provide PD, professional learning, to support teachers so they know how do you even
Mhm.
address academic integrity with kids. Again, it's a large term, right?
Mhm.
Maybe as teachers, we need to make sure they're not giving assignments that have too large of a cognitive load, or they're actually
Yeah.
teaching kids to break down these large projects. I was a middle school teacher, so I know all about
Yeah.
that, right? You got to
Yeah.
teach kids, okay, do this part by this date and this. So, how do we create the conditions so they don't feel the need to cheat, right? Our family's overloading kids, so they're coming back from soccer practice at 8 p.m. So, of course, they're going to cheat, whether it's AI or not. They don't have time,
Mhm.
and our students developing their time management skills. So
Mhm.
those are some of the basic ideas for how we can begin to address some of the underlying causes, as I understood it from your book. And then you
Yeah.
talk about, three things that students need to demonstrate when they complete assignments. And you talked a bit about them:
Mhm.
integrity, transparency, and explainability. And you give actual questions in the book that you can ask students. So, for example, to demonstrate integrity, you might ask a student, right, in writing or if one-on-one, right? How does your work accurately represent your independent thinking? Or for
Mhm.
transparency, tell me, what process or strategies did you use to complete this assignment? If we're not just saying, write this essay on Hamlet, but also answer some of these questions, then we can get at this integrity piece and teaching them that. Or even I love the explainability. I never heard that as a word. I'm not sure if it is a word, but now it is. Um, now that you've completed this assignment, just what you said, what are the three most important things to know about this topic and why? What if we all assigned that and kids have to do that, in writing or one-to-one, so that it's really about them learning? Can they explain it? So
Mhm.
I think those are some really concrete ways that you're getting at this principle of emphasizing integrity over the cheating. Um,
Yeah. And And the really important piece about those, did asking those types of questions eliminate all cheating? No, it's not going to. But what what it does, if we consistently, right, if our kids understand that's what I'm about, I want to know where you are,
Yep.
because that's the only way I can support you to take your next steps. And wherever you are is okay,
Yep.
because my job is to help you move you on to that next thing.
Yes.
And when kids know that's where we're coming from, and kids know that's the evidence also that we value, right? They're far less likely to simply try to be anonymous, to simply use AI tools. Um, Again, the equation is shifted, right? Kids now have access to a tool that can do almost any of their schoolwork.
Yeah.
And that means assessment has gotten a lot harder.
Hmm.
And that can't just be a discipline issue. It has to be a school culture issue, and it's also an assessment, an assignment design issue. We've got to be attuned to things like cognitive load, right? And relevance. Voice and choice are great. We also need to be attuned to competence.
Yep.
If I'm giving, if I'm printing a project board, because AI told me here are 9 whiz bang fun things your kids can do, but those are 9 things my kids might not have skills in and might overwhelm them. What's the gain there?
Right. Right. And that's connected. So your last principle is fidelity before efficiency. And you're right. You mentioned fidelity earlier. I certainly think of fidelity like, oh, I'm observing a math teacher. Is she at the right place in the curriculum? But that's not what you mean. You mean more, is um, is the lesson that AI has designed, is there fidelity to the standards that we're trying to teach,
Yep.
So can you explain a little bit more about that idea of fidelity before efficiency?
Yep. Yeah. So, AI tools can create anything, right? So if I'm using AI tools to do any part of any instructional planning or resources, I have an obligation to ensure that those resources I put in front of students are aligned to priorities. So that's the fidelity piece. And then, just like we talked about with students, transparency and explainability, right? As leaders, we need to make it clear and support our teachers' efforts to be able to document anytime they're using AI tools. I would argue anytime they're doing anything, right? Be able to say, here's where this resource came from. Here's where this assessment came from. Here's where this project came from. Right? We need to be transparent. We want to be able to retrace those steps and say, here's what this is and why I'm using it in my classroom.
Can I
But
ask you about
then,
that?
yeah.
So yeah, you have some really concrete questions that leaders can ask teachers to determine, this fidelity. Some of the
Mm-hmm.
questions you have are, how have the assessments and rubrics that you're using, Ms. Smith, how do they align to the standards and learning goals, right?
Mm-hmm.
If AI tools were used to assess student work in your class, Mr. Brown, how did you verify the accuracy and reliability of the feedback or scoring?
Mm-hmm.
Um, can you, Mr. Muhammad, be transparent and share what specific resources were used to plan this lesson or this assessment or this unit? Do you envision those kinds of questions like in a supervisory meeting with a leader and a teacher, or how did you intend for those questions to be used?
Yeah. Yep. It's perfectly parallel to what we talked about with students earlier. If the only time and I'm asking those questions is when I think a teacher has been, quote unquote, caught,
Hmm.
it's too late.
Okay.
I mean, right then we're already in that, just like with kids, that defensive
Yes.
space.
Yes.
It it just needs to be part of how we now do business.
Mm.
And the the third piece I'll add, and then talk a little bit more about the context, that notion of explainability, right? Just like we
Yeah.
want kids to be able to explain their work. If I'm teaching, anything I'm putting in front of kids, and I don't care if it's from a published resource that I'm required to use, or
Yeah.
from an AI tool, or
Yeah.
something I've been using for the last 20 years.
Yeah.
I need to be able to explain, right, here's what this thing is, here's why this presentation or is set up the way it is, here's the specific academic vocabulary
Yeah.
that's being used, and here's why
Yeah.
it's being used. We need to be able to explain, right? We've all been in that situation where we're watching someone give a presentation and it's clear that they're using someone else's slides or slides that have been given to
Yes.
them, and it's just painfully awkward, right? So, we can micromanage how teachers are using AI. That typically doesn't, bode well for our use of time, or nor does it foster trust with teachers. Or we can say, you can use AI, you can use things you found on the internet, you write whatever it may be. You need to be able to explain, how does this have fidelity to a stated priorities for teaching and learning? Where did you get these resources? Can you retrace your steps?
Yep.
Explain how you edited, right, went through these resources to ensure they were most appropriate for your learners and your learners' needs. Again, in the very near future, we're going to be bumping up against scenarios where, not saying I support this, but we are going to have to confront it. Kids are getting graded by AI tools.
Yeah.
If I'm a kid, if I'm a parent, I can have questions.
Yes.
If an AI tool was used to design an assessment,
Yeah.
We should be asking questions. How is that assessment valid, reliable, right? Have
Yes.
students had the opportunity to learn?
Yeah.
But those are questions we should be able to answer with or without AI. AI has kind of become the catalyst that is going to force us to be much more intentional.
Yes.
And thoughtful about,
yes,
what are we doing,
yeah.
and why, and how do we know it's of quality, and how is it aligned to our students' learning
Yeah,
needs?
I like your approach that it's let's treat teachers like professionals, and let's be proactive and not make it a gotcha. Hey, how have you been using AI? But instead, you suggest having discussions with teachers about some of these larger questions that you mentioned earlier. And what I would do in a school, you have a quote from the movie Jurassic Park, which is about how the scientists who brought the dinosaurs back to life, if you missed it. There's a quote from Jeff Goldblum who says, "Your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could that they didn't stop to think if they should." Right. So that's what we want our teachers to, we know you can, but should you? So I would put Jeff Goldblum, and I would show that clip. Maybe I'll put it in the show notes, and then put teachers together to ask some of these questions. And Tony's got them on page 54, right? Should we use AI? Which tasks should we use AI for? Which should be completely teacher created, right? Should we use AI for, student assessments when they're all multiple choice? Should we use AI to assess student work on more open-ended assignments? Like, get them together in grade level or departments, talking about these proactively so that they can think about them ahead of time. And then
Yep.
you do suggest putting together a committee to outline,
Yes.
an AI committee. What are some hard limits for what teachers should not be using AI for? So did you have any ideas in mind about what those hard limits might include?
Yeah, I think that, boy, that as you ask me that question, I think about how I might have answered that a year ago or 2 years ago, and a lot of it is going to come down to, what do we know about the capacity of the tool.
Mm.
So for your school, for your school's culture, if you want to say AI tools should not be used to assess student work or to grade student work, or to, I mean, those are local conversations that need to happen. And like you said, I have types of questions in the book just to get people thinking about what are the capacity of these tools.
Yeah.
But I absolutely think that notion of teachers are accountable for fidelity of any resources they put in front of their kids as related to priorities for what's most important to learn. Um, Transparency. How did you generate these resources? Where do they come from? And explainability. Can you explain the content, the decisions the AI tool made, whatever it may be? I would say that is a hard. We have to have those pieces in place in this day and age. Similar to how we need those expectations for integrity, transparency, and explainability in place for students. Um, I know a lot of schools, some schools where I've done some work, I knew good work around creating some boundaries for kids around, the extent to which they can use AI tools, and then we define through that transparency and explainability piece what students are accountable for. A piece that is really becoming clear to me, and to speak to the role of instructional leaders in schools and districts that don't have very clear curriculum in place.
Mm.
It's almost impossible to say, here are a few really specific things you can do to ensure that ways that teachers are using AI tools have integrity, right? They have fidelity. Schools that have good, rich curriculum frameworks and priorities, and right now, how I might use AI tools is so much clearer, because I can prompt those AI tools, using, right, here's the context, here's where we are in our learning sequence, these are the standards that we're using to prioritize instruction, here's the core academic vocabulary we've identified, right? When we can put those pieces into AI tools, it's pretty remarkable, right? What comes out. But when we just say plan a lesson on blank, or create a project board, create a worksheet on it, you just get nothing but randomness back. And the other thing I've been thinking a lot about, right? If I don't have enough clarity to prompt AI tools effectively,
Mm-hmm.
I probably don't have enough clarity to support my learners very effectively
Mm-hmm.
either.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If I can't be clear about my priorities, um,
Yeah. So
it,
maybe this is an opportunity. Maybe AI is
exactly,
forcing
exactly,
us.
exactly.
Can we clarify in
Yep,
schools, exactly what is our curriculum? What
yep,
does it look like for a student to graduate from eighth grade? What skills do we want the student to have? What does learning look like? What does assessment look like? So those areas where we're not so clear, AI is busting a hole in that. So maybe that's an area
yep,
to
yep.
focus
And we
on.
know in those areas that aren't so clear for our learners,
Yep.
they'll just say, just tell me how many points it's worth. Tell
Yep.
me how many paragraphs you want, right? Just tell me the directions and I'll give it back to you, and we'll move on to the next thing. And
Great.
and that's not what learning is, as we all know. So
Yeah. Great.
uh,
Well, yeah.
go ahead.
Did you want to add anything else? Because I was going to get to wrap it up pretty soon.
Yeah, I've two big ideas, and they do relate to the wrap up. There's fairly clear consensus emerging around what are the characteristics of interactions with AI tools that support learning, and what are the characteristics of interactions with AI tools that undermine learning.
Mm,
In the bottom, the would share two separate thoughts. For teachers, right, the risks of interaction are related to their prompts are too vague, and that's a lot of what you've been talking about. Just make me less non-blank.
mm,
But for kids, it's the opposite. For kids, their greatest risk of interacting with AI tools is that their interactions are too specific. In other words, they're just typing in the questions their teacher has asked them, and
hmm.
they're getting the reply. So, and I talk in the book about things we need to do to address those challenges. But then more broadly, AI tools undermine learning when they allow learners to accelerate through productive struggle.
Hmm.
Right? When they eliminate the need to engage in meaning making, to get stuck and ask questions and go back, AI tools undermine learning.
Yeah.
When we can use AI tools and help our students use AI tools in ways that help them slow down, right? Focus their efforts.
Hmm.
Prompts like, don't give me the answer
Hmm.
right away. Coach me through one step at a time.
Yep.
Ask me clarifying questions before moving on. AI tools have unbelievable capacity to support learning.
Yes.
But if we step back and think about that, if we build kids who have a sense of agency, right?
Hmm.
If we're supporting kids' efforts to ask questions, to understand it's okay to ask questions, that learning is productive struggle, that it's okay to ask for another example, it's okay to ask for some help, it's okay to try and mess it up and get some feedback. Those are learners who are a joy to work with and who go far.
Mm.
Those are the exact same ways that AI tools can do really cool things to help us learn, right? When we are assertive with them,
Yep.
when we ask for help, when we ask let's slow down here, help me get a deeper understanding, redefine that, give me another example. That's how AI tools are prompt effectively as well.
Yep.
So, my challenge to leaders, essentially would be this. As you think about AI, and we do have to be moving on this, there are some schools sitting on the sidelines that we've got to jump in.
Hmm.
But here's a way to think about this, right? As you think about the initiative and challenges associated with AI, if AI disappeared tomorrow, I don't think it's going to, but if AI disappeared tomorrow, what would still be worth working on
Mm.
as you think about strategy, as you think about how can you help your teachers and learners be more intentional
Hmm.
in the strategy and effort they put forth to teach and learn effectively. And if you can find answers where you say, you know what, even if AI disappeared, I'd still want my teachers to be able to do these, right? To teach with fidelity,
Hmm.
I'd still want my students to act with integrity. I'd still want my students to be able to have a strong sense of agency. If if you're matching those pieces up, you're doing the right work, and it's important work. And again, I can't encourage leaders enough to make this a priority, and a priority not just about technology, but a priority because the challenges and opportunities we face with AI it's really a mirror back on us about our values, about the challenges we're facing, and that the opportunities that we can harness.
Wow. Well, that's a great way to end. It's a mirror of our values and more. Yes. Thank you. There've been a lot of ideas here, a lot to digest. I usually go through a lightning round of one main idea from your book, one high leverage action, and one resource. I don't know if you were suggesting your high leverage action would be for leaders to imagine if AI disappeared tomorrow, but if you wanted to change it. So do you want to share just in, 30 seconds, a main idea to take away from your book, an action to do tomorrow or next week, and another resource?
Yep. Yeah. The main idea, AI tools are created to process everything more quickly. Good learning happens when we slow down. Think about how we can use AI tools to slow down the more effective, so we engage in more effective teaching and learning. The high leverage strategy for leaders: jump onto an AI tool, Claude, Gemini, latest version of ChatGPT, and just interact with it like you are a teacher. Ask it to plan some lessons, upload some standards, ask for feedback on the quality of an assignment or an assessment, and jump in there like a student. Think of something you forgot you ever knew, or maybe vaguely learned back in high school, and try to engage that tool in an AI tool as a tutor to help coach you and help teach you about some specific academic content.
Great.
And what was
Any
the
other
final
resource that you recommend? If
resource? You mentioned Ethan Malick's work
Yeah.
earlier. I encourage people to jump on the One Useful Thing blog, a great resource. and of course to grab AI with Intention, which is my book. So
Great, of course. Yes, and I will put a link to Ethan Mollick's his weekly blog or biweekly, I believe it is. Wonderful. And if people do want to learn more about you and your work, I'll certainly put a link to your book. Is there any other place you'd like to send them?
yeah, I think shoot me an email at TonyFrontier at gmail.com, or Google Tony Frontier. You'll find my website, you'll find articles and so on. So thank you.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time. I know you're really busy. This has just been such a useful book. I really think this is the important book for people to be reading. So I appreciate your time. For listeners, thank you. If you got something out of this podcast, I'd appreciate it if you would share it with colleagues. I'm sure they will appreciate it too. Thanks for listening. I'll see you soon. Until then, learn more and lead better.